Clinical Trials Guru. Again, that website is www.theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Hey everybody, we're here with Etienne Taylor. And I'm going to let Etienne Taylor explain exactly what he does, because I think he can spell it better than I can. You want to go ahead and get started, Etienne?
Certainly. This is Etienne Taylor from Clinical Trial Select, which is clinicaltrialselect.org. Anyway, we publish a clinical trial repository, and the goal, unlike a lot of clinical trial matching systems, which are generally tied to compensated search results, and what we do instead is we're completely unbiased. We have a listing of over 37,000, nearly 38,000 open clinical trials for all serious or life-threatening disease conditions. Of course, cancers are all there, but then so are a lot of other diseases. The idea being, the reason most people never make it into a clinical trial, even though lots of matching happens, is that nobody trusts the matching systems. And medical doctors, people's doctors, only tell people about the existence of clinical trials 3% of the time. And when somebody's got a diagnosis of something that is life-threatening, what that really means is that the current therapy is not going to save them. They're going to die. And even under those circumstances, clinical trial information is not shared because of this lack of trust. And, if you think about how under assault doctors are right now, this is a really poor time to be asking them to do something in the way of embracing data from the pharmaceutical industry into healthcare, into their practice through their encounter. It's just asking too much. So if you think about restless leg syndrome and the tens of millions of dollars the pharma industry spent advertising on television, and what that did, it drove people into their doctor's offices where, guess what? They already had free samples. And the doctor knew that if in about 90 seconds you didn't hand one of those samples over, that patient was going to go somewhere else, and they would lose that patient. So there is no resistance to what a patient wants, even something that may not be reasonable. So in the case of clinical trials, if you send a patient into the encounter to talk to their doctor without wasting that doctor's time, having already filtered some clinical trial results down to some possible matches, then the doctor will play along, because after all, they do want what's in their patient's best interest. It's just not feasible with 2,500 patients for them to do any research at all.
Right. True.
And it's it's just make believe to think that your doctor keeps up with his research, because he'll be the first one to tell you that's impossible.
Now, talk to us. We were talking a little bit in the pre-interview as we were figuring out how to use the Skype recorder. You were having a conversation with ePatient Dave?
Well, I was on his site with a lot of the notable people in healthcare. Susanna Fox from Pew and a lot of other interesting folks. And there was some discussion there about sharing patient data rather than siloing it. And that, of course, the way that this has to happen is that patients have to volunteer this data for research. And so effectively, people are sharing patient data with us when they ask for us to help them screen a trial. And we already anonymize them. We don't track who they are. And so we're kind of halfway there. The VA has a really famous initiative called the Blue Button Initiative, which allows a member to click a single button and their entire health record from the EMR is downloaded. Which is a very helpful thing, as you can imagine. So thinking of that in reverse, somebody online on this forum, just now, suggested a green button initiative where you'd volunteer your data to science. Here's the contents of my EMR. Now it's anonymized, you don't know who I am, but go ahead and use this for whatever research purposes you need. And for us, we have a second version of this coming, of course, which uses natural language processing technologies to match the inclusion-exclusion criteria for a finer filter than we offer now. And so I just decided right then and there that we would offer this green button. And along with it, somebody suggested, well, here's all the legal contracts you'll need. They're already in process. They'll be ready and published in the open domain, in the public domain, open source, within a couple of months. So just there on that form, we saved what would have been 3 or 4 months of running around looking for volunteer legal advice on how to do this. So very, very powerful stuff.
Wow.
Okay. Now, what is your, because for people that don't know, Clinical Trial Select, it is a nonprofit, right? What is your thoughts on paid search for clinical trials?
On paid search.
Like paid search results, like some of the sites out there that are using search engines, and you said that the results are a little biased.
Oh no, it's incredibly unethical,
Okay.
especially to the degree that it's cloaked in large healthcare nonprofits and disease advocacy groups who you would expect to have the patient's best interest at heart. Really, they're fundraising organizations, and so it's unbelievably unethical. Healthcare is fraught with questionable ethics and revenue models, and no more so than the clinical trial business, where patients are really sold at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is basically there's nothing out there outside of like clinicaltrials.gov that's completely unbiased, now. And there are some smaller niche
I don't want to
engines.
say nothing,
Okay.
but that's largely true.
Okay.
During the 1990s, the VC community got all excited about clinical trial matching and funded a lot of really, really evil efforts that have all failed spectacularly since.
Okay.
Because they weren't trusted by medical doctors and by healthcare in general, for good reason, for the reasons we're talking about.
Interesting.
Clinicaltrials.gov is great, but what it really is a pharmaceutical submission system for the FDA. That's what really works.
So the purpose of that is not necessarily to help people find studies.
Well, it is and it isn't. It's just that they didn't really, it's a low-cost bid government situation
Mm-hmm.
where somebody put up a website and offered some client-server matching, which is great, but, a breast cancer trial, for instance, is also a skin cancer trial.
Mm-hmm.
So unless you support the actual ontology that separates these definitions, the very ontology that clinicaltrials.gov uses in their protocol submission system, you can't be sure that you found all the trials.
Right.
Nor can you be sure of the accuracy of your matches. So what we do that clinicaltrials.gov doesn't even bother doing is that we use that ontology that they use on the much more carefully architected protocol submission system to the FDA, that they're a real business.
Mm-hmm.
Then they offer people trying to find trial information.
And what has been the feedback from your search engine, clinicaltrialselect.org? What has been the feedback from the users, if any, so far?
It's reasonably easy to use. I mean, we have kind of of the old Yahoo link-based system where you can kind of crawl it from condition category, cancers and other neoplasms, click, to breast cancer, click, and then just enter some pretty simple information. And when you're done, you get what we call an eligibility report.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty interesting.
So, and of course, there are people that are not web savvy, and of course they fall off. So why we think our feedback has been pretty good is because it matters less what people say, because everybody universally says nice things. Why wouldn't we? We do it for free.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, how many page views?
Right. Yeah, it's all about results at the end of the day, right?
That's right. And most of our users, at least the average, is over 12 to 15 page views. So they're really getting into the system.
So they're going in depth. They're not just visiting
Yes.
for like a second and then leaving.
That's
They
right.
are
That's interesting.
extremely involved, extremely active, and once they're there, is it likely they'll come back, or is it like a one-time use thing and then they don't come back?
Well, we know the answer in general. We're still deploying our analytics so that we can tell, rather than just by IP. We track IP numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we haven't really drilled down to figure out who's coming back and who's not. We will. We know right now that, because keep in mind, we anonymize who these people are, so we make it a little more difficult for ourselves.
Okay.
But not impossible to at least statistically figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have a better idea shortly.
I know you and Dan have spoken in the past, but what prompted you to do this? What prompted you to bring all this together?
I don't know, peak professional pride. I was really interested in the legislation which enabled the whole electronic medical records initiative in the first place, which was during the Clinton administration, the 1997 FDA Modernization Act.
Okay.
It also mandated that clinical research would have to be made public. And so in the year 2000, clinicaltrials.gov was launched. And compliance actually wasn't that great, because it turns out, like a lot of stuff in Congress, a rider piece of legislation was passed a few months later, and it essentially said that the pharmaceutical companies didn't have to submit this information if they didn't feel like it. Mm-hmm. All they really needed to do was send a letter in saying, hey, we're going to be at a competitive disadvantage if we publish our protocol information.
Interesting.
So it wasn't until the International Journal of Medical Editors, I got that wrong, but the group that includes all the peer-reviewed journals got together and said, look, we're not going to publish anything unless you first submit to clinicaltrials.gov. And since that statement was made, submissions have been up in the high 90s, 99% sometimes. So the problem got solved, even though it wasn't really the government that did it.
Right. Where do you see Clinical Trial Select, let's say 5 years from now? Do you see it having much more scale, a lot more users? Are you going to add new studies?
The Pew people, I think, said that there's probably 2 million people every month looking for clinical trial information.
Interesting.
Every month?
Yeah, every month. And there's a lot of people that aren't on the web that we can't reach. We're not going to be able to publish or buy newspaper ads the way pharma does.
Is this I'm sorry, going back to the 2 million a month, is this global or national?
I'd have to check. I suspect that's a national number.
Okay. That's a lot. Yeah, I know there's 20 million Americans in a trial every year. So.
Right, and there's at least 5 million that go wanting, right? The system worldwide needs 45 million people, probably, and there's probably at least 5 million that they're short at any one time. Mm-hmm. But if you think about a cancer diagnosis and what people do after they get one of those, they search pretty aggressively.
Okay. Yeah, just like E-Patient Dave, I mean, he was like into his search, and he was not just settling for one search result. I mean, he was like in depth researching and stuff. So he's an edge case probably, but there are lots of people that follow. Yeah, right.
And so yeah. But he's also the kind of person that not only did this research, but has been aggressively sharing since then.
Right.
Well, let me take you a step back then. I'm an individual out there, and I'm looking for a clinical study. So I would go onto your website to see what's available for my particular illness.
That's one way to look.
Okay.
You can search by disease condition. It's certainly the most common. However, there's always another way to think about this. And sometimes your doctor might tell you, this is an actual use case, that, hey, I don't have time to look into this, but I hear that this new drug, Avastin, for instance, may be really helpful for your particular kind of brain cancer. And I know that there are no clinical studies available for Avastin for brain cancer. So go ahead and find me the ones in your area that are available for breast cancer. And I will call the investigators to see about it, a compassionate use exemption. So that's an example of where you'd want to look outside of your disease condition and do a drug search.
Yeah, I can see many ways in which your tool could be very useful. And for those of you that want to look at it, it's clinicaltrialselect.org. I wasn't sure if it was .com or .org. .org.
Meaning we're a nonprofit.
Yeah, talk to us a little bit about that. Where do you get your funding from? I know we covered that a little bit last time. Is it just donations? If people want to help out, what can they do?
The American Cancer Society got us going with the nonprofit equivalent of startup capital. And so we're grateful for that. Since then, it has been all donations. And we've got some board members that help us out. And generally, when somebody deals with a cancer diagnosis in their family, successfully or not, they're really attuned to this problem, and many of those people get involved. So we just have a button that says donate.
Okay.
And people whip out their credit cards, people we don't know.
Would you ever, because right now the search engine is designed for people with life-threatening conditions, right?
Right.
Would you ever consider opening it up to clinical trials just in general?
Well, insofar as clinicaltrials.gov does, we would.
You would?
Yeah, because clinicaltrials.gov does include, but it's not required to, some trials that are not for life-threatening conditions.
Okay.
Very few, really. So the practical answer is not really, because we rely on the ontology that the FDA requires for submissions, that categorization system.
Okay.
So really, FDA scientists maintain this ontology for us, and we web index it, we extract it, and so anytime it changes, we have that change almost instantly. We update 5 days a week.
Okay.
It's not just data.
Now let's back up here to the clinicaltrials.gov example. I was under the impression that every study has to be listed on there. Am I wrong?
Well, every study that the FDA Modernization Act defines as serious or life-threatening.
Okay, so if it's not serious or life-threatening, it may be on there, but it doesn't have to be on there.
Yeah, let's just say it's not. Let's just say it's not. That would be closer to accurate.
Okay.
There's a lot of trials for medical devices, for instance. And yet, this is also we also have categories for vitamins and nutritional supplements, which are in fact for disease-threatening conditions. But if you want to see how a vitamin or supplement actually works in a clinical trial setting, as opposed to what the guy at the health food store might say.
Right, yeah.
It's really a good resource for that.
Wow.
See, I'm glad we do these interviews because I learned something here.
Yeah.
I mean, I was under the assumption that every study is going to be on clinicaltrials.gov, and, I guess silly of me to think that. And it is, come to think of it, because we do a lot of studies at South Coast Clinical Trials. Most are not life-threatening. And about half the time I find them on there, and the other half I can't seem to find them, and I always assumed I wasn't searching right. But from what you're just telling us, it's probably not on there.
Well, it may not be on there, and the other thing is the problem with how clinicaltrials.gov is set up. It's just a client-server database web form, and so it doesn't tell you when you didn't find it.
Yeah, and it's not very user-friendly at all. I've sent so many study participants there through this blog, and they're a little bit intimidated by it. So we've started to use CenterWatch, because it's a little more user-friendly. But then again, they don't have every study. I guess they have a certain setup where they only have certain
Yeah.
studies that they will
Yeah,
show.
maybe they only have the studies that pay to be CenterWest customers.
Right. Yeah, I've always
Exactly,
wondered about the
yeah.
business
And
models.
I don't know that's true. But
I
if
don't
it is-
either. Yeah.
But if it is true, that's enough reason for someone's doctor to say, no, forget it.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't talk to you about it because I don't trust your source.
So Clinical Trial Select is here to kind of, I guess, be the voice of reason, be the unbiased source of information. Say, hey, if you've got a life-threatening condition, our search engine's going to provide you, empower you with data that you can physically print out and physically bring to your doctor.
That's right. Revenue models
It's quite interesting.
corrupt data. As soon as you accept bounties and everything else, no matter what they're called, from the pharma industry, you wind up favoring one trial over another. There's a major nonprofit in the let's just say healthcare disease advocacy space that uses a matching system from another nonprofit, right? And when you enter in a search for, say, liver cancer, what you see in your results are all these pain trials that you didn't ask for.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, when we do a head-to-head comparison, we found 38 liver cancer trials they didn't find. So one suspects that you have to pay that nonprofit a listing fee, or they don't call it that, they just say, give us $2,500 and you're a member, right? But it turns out that nonprofit also owns a C corporation, for-profit company, which does, guess what? It helps pharma companies
Right.
set up clinical trials. So you can see what's going on there.
I know a few without naming names, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly, without naming
Yeah.
names. So, we're not that.
And you will never be that, right? As far as
No,
what I can
we
hear.
can't be. We can't be and talk this way. Yeah, having said that, it is very, very difficult to survive on donations. And, we're an all-volunteer effort, too.
So how many staff do you have there? Oh, go ahead, Don. You want to...
Yeah, it sounds like you're sort of in the same form that we're in. Then is pretty much is you're a library of information.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But it's not just information, it's workflow. And we're supporting the doctor-patient encounter, and we're sensitive to what that workflow has to be. You can't show up in your doctor's office with a shoebox full of photocopies or screenshots from WebMD and expect him to do anything but throw his hands up.
Mm-hmm. Would you...
So you have to respect the fact he's got about 7 minutes.
Yes.
Well,
It's not 10, it's not 11.
would you consider what you do to be social media at all? I mean, if you look at the definition, I guess, if there even is one, you're getting people to act upon...
Well, actually, we're deploying that now, and in fact, what we think is really important is Facebook's new, I guess it's their send button, because people don't want to just blast their clinical trial information to everybody that may be following on their Facebook page, but they might want to be able to pick and choose family members to share it with. And so there's some bugs in their implementation of that, but as soon as they have it worked out, it'll be up on our site. So we're going to be a lot more socially integrated than we are now.
Okay. Yeah, it seems to be the new trend. I was going to get into how many staff members you have, but you kind of touched on that as far as they're all volunteer-based.
Well, still, we have a core group. Some of them have given thousands, not hundreds, thousands of hours. These are developers that charge their employers $150 an hour kind of thing. And anytime they give us an hour, it's an hour they could have sold for $150.
Wow. That's pretty commendable.
Well, and because of the nature of our mission and the fact that we really don't pay anybody, we're really able to attract people like this. And that's why we've been able to do what we've been able to do, actually.
Wow, that's beautiful.
So, as far as, I guess, I mean, there's really no commercialization possibility for your site?
There might be, but we're working on a link architecture which means, see, we have a hierarchy that's not really a hierarchy. In other words, you can search for something by filtering by disease condition and then by drug,
Okay.
or you can search by drug and then by disease condition. Those are different searches.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Think about all those combinations. There's about 1 million of them possible in link architecture, the different ways of getting to 37,000 trials.
Right.
So we're going to publish a sitemap that may have as many as 1 million different link combinations in the link architecture.
Mm-hmm.
And then after we do that, we expect that each one of these link combinations is really somebody's homepage. In other words, when you're typing in Google about what you care about, you may land on something very different within the interior of the site than if you had crawled through from the homepage.
Right.
And so that's, we're looking at that as being a real traffic builder. And then from that, of course, we need to do things like hang blogs and stuff off of it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, and that's a long way of answering your question, because once you build that kind of traffic and get a referral deal from a major, and we're talking to several healthcare information sites, commercial healthcare information sites, ad revenue is possible. And so we would want to enjoy that sort of revenue in a way that it could be characterized as a donation. And so if the advertising were not saying buy this drug for this condition,
Right.
or generally saying, hey, we support this effort,
Right.
then it can be characterized as a nonprofit donation. And so we need to get all that worked out, get all that engineering done before we can enjoy any sort of this revenue.
Yeah, right. And it seems like you would need some kind of a critical mass before you can actually monetize that.
Oh, absolutely. But this really complex link architecture that I just described, where every AJAX session, is its own, you've got its own unique Quora-like link.
Okay.
Is the key to that kingdom.
So how long have you guys been in business?
Well, this project's been going in one form or another for 9 years.
Okay, so you've been around.
This is our third anyway, system.
Okay.
Literally from the ground up. So we've done this for quite a while.
I'm curious to know if this type of search engine would work as a monetizable way of referring people to unbiased results. Is that at all possible? Or we kind of talked about that?
We can't get involved in recruiting fees, from pharma. I mean, we can take pharma money if they're willing to say, we're proud sponsors of this site.
Okay.
And we haven't even asked them that question because it's again a matter of critical mass. Pharma is really only interested in what happens in the next quarter.
Yeah, right.
And healthcare companies, they have their own challenges. So,
So as we wrap up here, let's say we have, Sally in Montana, and Sally's just been diagnosed with some life-threatening condition. Ideally, she doesn't necessarily have to consider clinical trials immediately, but let's say she tries some form of treatments, they don't work, she starts getting interested, she maybe hears about clinical trials, and she goes to your site. Just give us a real basic overview for the people who don't know anything about Clinical Trial Select, what she can do once she's on your site. And first of all, how would she find out about your site? And then second of all, what she can do once she's there.
Well, the way you find out about our site is organic search.
Okay.
Or by referral.
So if she types in on Google, like, clinical trial, or is it more specific?
Well, again, this link architecture is going to make a really big difference. So let's forget about how she finds it.
Okay.
Because we have not optimized that for her to the extent we need to.
Okay.
But once she does find it, she should ask her doctor if he or she will spend some time reviewing a filtered list of trials she may qualify for. And if she has a life-threatening disease, the treatment's not working, and the doctor says no to that, then she should find another doctor. In our experience, the doctors won't say no. It's just they're completely overstressed and they need help.
Right.
So when she comes to our site, the top 12 conditions are links, so there's not much to do other than click breast cancer, and you get all the breast cancer trials. And then from there, there's a little form where you can say what your zip code is and how many miles you want to travel. You enter some more information, and you can winnow that list down. I mean, the goal would be to get that list short enough so that you can make it through one or two encounters. And the good news for the doctor, by the way, that most doctors are unaware of, is that there are existing billing codes which will cover this in the encounter.
Wow.
So like a clinical trial consultation, or...
Absolutely. There's several ICD-9 codes, and then there are associated billing codes with that. And what that means is that nobody has to teach the payer to pay the bill.
Because I was always under the impression that a lot of physicians, and I've had a physician state this to me, were uncomfortable about releasing their clients to clinical trials because they thought they were going to lose that client, which meant...
Well, that's another issue, and they're correct. But hear me out. So when they lose that client, it's going to cost them $2,000 to $2,200. We know this from NCI study. And that money is to replace that patient. So they're absolutely right. On the other hand, if you look at your entire practice of 2,500 people, and you were to say, okay, 10% of my patient practice should be screened for clinical trials, let's say. Mm-hmm. And then you figure $225 for 1.5 encounters for each of them. Most of those people are not good candidates for those trials. Most of those people are better off on the therapy that they're already on. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so what your doctor has done is he has turned a profit. This is, in fact, probably the most profitable part of his practice. And that fear is justified, but it's unfounded if he runs the numbers, because certainly he will lose some to trials. The benefit being that patient might live. On the other hand, he was going to lose them anyway, because that this is a mortal condition.
Right. And we're talking about more life-threatening illnesses versus illnesses that may be chronic but not life-threatening.
Right. That's right. But it's still the patient's choice, and it's the doctor that ought to be enabling this, and it doesn't cost him money if he looks at his entire practice population.
Okay.
Now, they don't know this, and they're so under siege, and this particular issue is such a sore point. It's difficult to communicate that to them. And so the best strategy, we think, is just to flood the doctor's office with the patients coming in with these eligibility reports, and give them the same problem Pharma gave doctors for restless leg syndrome.
Yeah. Right.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to say, what I like about Clinical Trial Select is it plays a role in the overall public awareness of clinical trials. It's not just assuming you already know what a trial is. It encourages the person to print out tons of data and physically hand it to their doctor, which forces a conversation. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the clinical trial would not even net, how many percent of the time would it actually be discussed? 3%?
Yep, 3%.
So that's what I like about Clinical Trial Select, and I think it's very powerful.
3% of the time, the doctor will let the patient know that clinical trials even exist. Mm-hmm. Over 40-some-odd% of the time, in the case of cancers, at least according to the NCI, patients better off in the context of a clinical trial, i.e., they're going to, it's at least life-extending. Mm-hmm. And then some 78% of the time, patients won't consider a trial unless the doctor tells them about it or concurs with the idea. So there's the Gordian knot. And the way to cut that Gordian knot is indeed to send patients in with these eligibility reports and give their doctors this problem.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I like that approach. I really do, because that's been one of the dilemmas too with actually recruiting patients. Is trying to get the doctors involved and to get them to really look at what's going on.
The way to get doctors involved is to put them in charge.
Yeah.
Don't sneak behind their backs and try to
empower them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I like that approach.
Yeah, that's entire paradigm shift.
Yeah.
So it's going to take some time for this to actually become utilized as a real strategy, but it should be the only way to introduce people to clinical trials.
Yeah, no, I think once we find partnerships with the larger medical health information sites, we can deploy our technology on those websites. We don't need any branding, really.